Just want to check that you're awake. So this afternoon we have a very special guest. The guest is Elizabeth Sherwood-Randall. Dr. Randall attended college at Harvard and then, with some dubious judgment, went to Oxford as a young scholar. She worked at Stanford, at Harvard, and on the Council on Foreign Relations. From 94 to 96, she served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. From 2009 to 2013, she was Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for European Affairs at the National Security Council. And from 2013 to 2014, as the White House Coordinator for Defense Policy, Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction and Arms Control. Dr. Randall joined the Department of Energy in October 2014. Please, Deputy Secretary Elizabeth Sherwood-Randall.
Thank you. It's just great to be here. I want to thank Andrew and Doug and Allison, who gave me a whirlwind tour, and I feel the excitement of this place. I feel how much people love what they're doing, and it was wonderful to be briefly on the scientific frontier with some of you. I live on that frontier sometimes at home. I have two young scientists at home. They're teenage boys, and they love to hear about what's going on in our labs and sometimes conduct their own experiments in our house. And last year I smelled something burning while I was working in my home office, and I went venturing downstairs to see what was going on. I went down to the basement and I discovered that my 17-year-old son Richard was trying to launch a hot air balloon. And this was for a school project, and all of the ways in which he was trying to launch it, to fill it, involved the use of fire. And he had not apprised me of this endeavor. After multiple tries, he actually succeeded in getting it into the air, and he did not burn down our house, which was a good thing. But it reminded me of some advice he had gotten a number of years ago when he was working on a science fair project that had failed miserably, and he was extremely unhappy about that. And we were having dinner with Bill Perry, who was the Secretary of Defense, who I had the privilege of serving when I was at DOD, as you noted, in the 90s. And Bill has been something of a mentor to the boys, and Richard described this failed project, and Bill looked at him straight in the eyes and he said, "You know, Richard, if you don't fail at first, you're not trying something bold enough." It's been, for him, for us as a family, the mantra, but it's also true for what we're doing in the DOE enterprise. That spirit reflects the kind of work you're doing here, pushing out the boundaries of science and technology, and we have to be willing to take those risks and fail sometimes before we succeed. To get our conversation started, I wanted to place what you do here in the broader context of the department's strategic agenda. In 2014, Secretary Moniz put out a strategic plan, and it identified goals in 3 areas: in science and energy, in nuclear security, and in management and performance. A more colloquial way in which the Secretary describes what we do is he describes this as the Department of Weapons and Windmills, Quarks, and Quagmires. And obviously you have a starring role in that more humorous description of our department. So I think I'll start with science and energy. Your work is part of the broad spectrum of DOE research, development, and deployment of innovative energy technologies. Secretary Moniz often uses the metaphor of DOE's role in the innovation chain, starting with fundamental science, then looking at applications of new discoveries, developing and piloting those technologies, and then bringing new technologies to widespread deployment in the marketplace. By looking at the structure of atoms down to the level of quarks, your lab is helping us understand the stuff of which our world is made. And you're testing whether the standard model is correct, and you're building our understanding of the fundamental forces of the universe. No other facility in the world, I have learned, has the precision and intensity necessary to conduct this research. And indeed, you, where is he sitting? Repeatedly, Doug spoke to me about that precision as we were walking around today. You also perform critical collaborative roles with other labs in our amazing 17 lab network, what I consider to be jewels in the crown of this nation, so that you enable others to stay on the cutting edge and enable our next generation to perform the kind of cutting edge research that you do here. So for example, you're collaborating with SLAC right now at Stanford. I also want to commend you for the work that you do with STEM educators. I know a number of you are involved in supporting that work at every level to make your work accessible to students and inspire the next generation, because we need that generation of researchers and engineers to choose to get well enough educated that they can participate in endeavors like the ones that you undertake here. And indeed, I read an amazing statistic, and I checked it out, and I was told it's actually true that 1/3 of the nuclear physicists who get PhDs in this nation use the facilities here for their research. That was true for 2014. That is an amazing fact. In addition, we want to do this because we want to stay on the cutting edge globally, and this is something that I've made a very high priority for us, and it involves that translation of the cutting edge work done, the fundamental science to the applied science to the deployment. We want to make that available to the American people to generate jobs and growth for our economy and keep us competitive in the world. So thank you for all that you do here. Second, I'll talk briefly about what we do in nuclear security. That's actually my comfort food. My career has been made in the national security space, and a great deal of time spent on nuclear security topics. His speech in Prague in 2009, and then again in Berlin in June of 2013, President Obama called for the world to work together to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and materials into the hands of terrorists. He called on the world to reduce its stockpile of nuclear weapons and those materials, to strengthen our non-proliferation efforts globally, all the while maintaining a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent for our nation. Obviously, this is not a major mission area for this lab, though it is for a number of others, but your expertise helps us to remain a world leader in understanding nuclear physics. In addition, your laser and superconducting technologies have been of importance in our defense enterprise, and I understand have drawn interest from the US Navy recently, including research here at JLab with the free electron laser. And as we get into questions and answers, if you want to talk a little more about the nuclear security agenda, I'd be glad to discuss it. I'm sure a number of you know that Secretary Moniz is currently in Vienna, where he has been for several weeks at the negotiating table with Secretary Kerry. And this work, the options that we have put forward, which the President has given the go-ahead to our negotiating team to present, are based heavily on the work of our National Laboratory Network. And the President has confidence in those options because of the capability of our scientists. Finally, the Secretary set forth management and performance goals. These focus on our ability to build and operate the unique facilities that our work requires. And here you are building one of those new unique facilities, and I want to congratulate you on achieving critical decision 4A on the Continuous Electron Beam Accelerator Facility Upgrade project last summer. Finishing the accelerator and civil construction was a major milestone, and I commend the lab on continuing to make progress on the experimental halls that remain to be completed. And I heard today how impatient people are to get this back up and running, and I understand that by the end of next year, that should be the case. Investments like the upgrade to CBAF are part of DOE's commitment to discovery science and are an important part of our mission to delve into the deepest mysteries of the universe and understand the fundamental building blocks of matter. Now, I'm not a hard scientist like many of you are, but I am extremely honored to learn about the pioneering science that you achieve here and that you will continue to achieve. with this amazing world-class instrument that we're upgrading. Not only are you world leaders in science, but you're on the cutting edge of technology development too. JLab technologies have been applied to problems in cryogenics, medicine, biology, ecology, space science, material science, and more. I've learned a little bit about this in preparing for the visit and heard some more while I was here today. Your cryogenics technologies the ones that you have developed here have been awarded the White House Closing the Circle Award. Your work helped NASA build the infrastructure required to test the James Webb Space Telescope and has also helped other DOE labs to reduce their facilities' energy requirements for cryogenics, like at Brookhaven and Oak Ridge National Labs. And your technologies are helping to save lives. We talked a little about this today. Biomedical devices based on your detector technology licensed by Dillon Technologies are now sold worldwide with over 220 cameras in the hands of doctors. These devices have imaged over 250,000 patients and are helping to detect breast cancers that would otherwise not be so well detected. I was also fascinated to learn more about the capacity to image mice's brains in motion, which may have broader applications that are very significant going forward. And these examples are just a few of the ways in which commercialization from your lab has developed technology that's having a real impact on the American people. Finally, I want to emphasize safety as a management and performance priority. It's something I talk about when I go to every lab and every site in our enterprise. It's a very high priority for the secretary and for me because, quite frankly, it's the people of our department who make our mission possible. It's not our machines that are our number one asset, it's our people who are our number one asset. Indeed, last week I was at Sandia in Albuquerque, and one of the researchers described their work as the secret sauce in a new innovation. And I responded, well, actually, it's our people who are the secret sauce. Because of you, we get to look at the secret lives of quarks and gluons. We get to examine the world in whole new ways, and we keep the United States on the forefront of innovation. So I'll just close by saying that when I left the White House last September, I had the privilege of taking a ride with the President on Marine One, on his helicopter. And his guidance to me in coming to DOE was go out there to all those amazing labs and lift up the work that's being done there and bring it forward to the American people, to the benefit of the American people. So I made it my mission to come to every lab in my first year. This is my 14th lab. So I have 3 more to go, and I feel very privileged to serve all of you as Deputy Secretary. Thank you for welcoming me here today, and I hope I can answer a few questions and take back a few questions if I can't answer them, and then get back to you. I appreciate your being here.
Okay, so we have some rules of engagement. So, so this is not, tomatoes such as you might throw at me are not entirely appropriate on this occasion. What you should do if you want to ask a question, and I hope you do, you should raise your hand. Runners who are not shy, they'll get to you with the microphone. You should wait until you get the microphone, and then you should state who you are, name and University of Indiana professor, or summer student for the second year, or member of the physics department. So just give an indication of where you're from and what your name is, of course, please. And this Deputy Secretary will try and answer. So, all yours.
Tell me what you do also, where you're from and what you work on.
Mac. That's not sufficient, I believe.
My name is Mac Medier, and I'm a staff physicist in the physics division. My question is about nuclear security, and it's a political question. It seems to me, what is the general strategy in getting other nations who do not yet have nuclear weapons to not get them when there's a group of whatever it is, 7 or 10, who do have them? How do we, what's the political strategy in saying, look, we have them and you can't have them?
That's a great question. So there are multiple dimensions of the strategy. One dimension is to provide extended deterrence. So for our allies around the world, we have provided the security that they need not to develop their own nuclear weapons. That's been true, for example, in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization since it was created in the late 1940s. We provided the deterrent for our European allies. We do the same in Asia for the Japanese and the Koreans. And so prong one or path one, or whatever metaphor you want to use, is extended deterrence. And that's been important in persuading countries not to pursue their own nuclear programs. A second prong is to persuade countries that they will be penalized if they pursue nuclear weapons, and that involves making them feel are pariahs if they go down the nuclear path. And as you can see in the case of Iran, that's been a pretty costly process for the Iranians, which ultimately brought them to the negotiating table. It's because of the economic consequences of an extremely effective sanctions regime that we've had in place for a number of years. It's not because the Iranians don't want a nuclear weapon, I think they really do, but they recognize that the international pressure that has been applied creates a cost-benefit analysis for them that results in their needing to make the choice to give up that path in order to reap the benefits of being integrated into the world economy. Another dimension of our strategy is to have additional of influencing countries' choices, and some of that is in the classified domain to try to shape behavior. And some of that when you read the reporting of journalists like David Sanger, who's been very aggressive about seeking out information about how we try to compel countries to do things that are uncomfortable for them. Finally, I would add that there are countries that are at decision points about whether to nuclearize or to give up nuclear weapons who are responsive to partnership with us. And those aren't necessarily allies, but I experienced this during that period that you mentioned when I served at the Pentagon in the 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed and 15 countries were born. 4 of them had nuclear weapons on their territory: Russia, and Kazakhstan. And it was determined that only one country should be the nuclear successor state to the Soviet Union. It would be Russia. It would inherit the Arms Control Agreement responsibilities that the Soviet Union had accepted. And the 3 countries, therefore, needed to be persuaded to give up their nuclear weapons. And the reason I went to the Pentagon at that time was to lead the effort to get those 3 countries to give up their nuclear weapons. And what we learned was, if you offer partnership to a country, it may not be an alliance, but if you offer a country an opportunity to develop in ways that it sees to be beneficial, so for example, in the case of a country like Kazakhstan or Ukraine, a desire to be integrated into the world community, to have a military that was not Soviet, but actually trained by Western partners. There was again a calculus made by its leadership that it would be better to give up nuclear weapons better than the alternative, which was to become a pariah state and instead become a partner with the West. And so one of the things that I learned from that period was how important it is to put yourself in the shoes of the country you're trying to influence and think about what its interests are and what's most important to that country's leaders and that country's people, and then try to be responsive to those needs.
Okay, one center back, one on the right, there's no on the right.
Lynn Wells, I work in the CFO's office. You mentioned that one of your goals was to visit all the labs in the first year to help with the goal of lifting up what we do as useful to the public. So have you come up with any ideas of how we can do that better? Because I know I struggled before coming to the lab. I had no idea except for Los Alamos because of the bombs. So what are some of the things that you thought of that might help us get more visibility?
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, I always present a challenge because, as I said, I'm not a hard scientist. We need to do better at explaining what we do in our science labs. so that people who are not scientists can understand it. And actually, I picked up your materials when I came in today, and you have terrific materials that endeavor to do precisely that. But finding a way to talk to people who are not trained in the fields of expertise here is critically important. And we have a big project underway at DOE Central at headquarters, using our public affairs team to try to help to tell this story more effectively in a way that non-scientists can appreciate the value of what is being done in our labs. A good example of that is that tomorrow we will have a National Lab Day on Capitol Hill. A number of our labs are participating. We're going to have 4 of those. We've broken the labs up into groups, and the idea is to really showcase for our legislators who hold the power of the purse, as you know if you're in the CFO's office, to showcase what we do for the American people and really bring it forward in a way that is understandable, because we don't have very many people on the Hill who fully appreciate, unless they have a lab in their district, who appreciate what's being done. Another way in which we're doing it that's quite important is that the Secretary has set up a new Office of Technology Transitions that's in the department, in headquarters. And the goal there is to identify across our lab network where there are ways in which we can support labs in partnering with the private sector in bringing forward the technology that's ready for deployment. And finally, we have our Loan Programs Office, which is an office that has benefited from funding, from a variety of funding streams, that is investing in technologies that are coming out of our labs, but which are not yet ready for widespread deployment. So a good example of that is the work that has been done in the solar space. Initially, we put funding from our Loan Programs Office into a number of efforts to use solar power for utility scale electricity generation. And after 5 such investments, we're now seeing the private sector take over their 17 utility scale PV projects, solar PV projects in the country. So a variety of ways in which we're trying to take what's being done in our labs and push it out to the benefit of the American people.
Mo, maybe you should stand up.
Pardon?
Hello, how are you doing today?
Hi.
My name is Mo. I am a second-year co-op student here in the lab. And my question to you is...
Where are you a student, Mo?
I just graduated from Morehouse College in Atlanta.
Great.
My question to you is, as we're moving forward and getting degrees in physics, engineering, and other related fields, how do you see the future of funding across the nation for basic sciences and within the DOE?
So my advice to all young people is study science, technology, engineering, and math, because that's where the jobs are going to be. And we see this, the energy sector is one of the most dynamic sectors of our economy, if not the most dynamic. And if you have a degree in science, in technology, in engineering, math, some combination thereof, you have a bright future, and there are tremendous opportunities for working not only in a way that will support you in the future, but be interesting and meaningful work. Because one of the things that I talk about with my kids is it's not enough just to find a job. You want to find a job that sustains your interest throughout. If you're fortunate enough to live a long life, you want to get up every morning and love what you do. You want to feel what I saw your people feel, which is how excited you are about doing what you get to do here. My kid said to me recently, Mom, we don't really know what it means to have a 9-to-5 job. And I was very interested to hear that, and I thought about it, and it's true, they haven't seen it. And I said, well, I hope you never do, because I hope that what you're doing is so interesting that you're not punching, looking at how many hours you've worked, but seeing of your work and caring about it so much that you're not just watching your watch. As far as funding goes, I think you can have confidence that we will continue to sustain funding for the fundamental science that powers our nation. Now, we face challenges on the budgetary front, there's no question. There have been dips in science, we don't get all the money we want. Sometimes we face ridiculous things like shutdowns that affect all of you, sequester, which screws up our budgeting. We fight back hard. We demonstrate, as we're doing on the Hill tomorrow, how valuable what you do is, and we engage. The Secretary and I spend a lot of time talking to our colleagues on the Hill about the importance of what's happening in our lab. So I think you should feel confident that there will be support for fundamental science, It won't always be at the level that we want because there's competition for federal dollars. But you should stay the course. You should go on to graduate school and look at our vast enterprise and find a place to work. Thanks, Mo, for being here.
Okay, so Sebastian.
Sebastian Kuhn, I'm a professor at Sherwood-Randall University nearby.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you at all. Speak
Okay, my name is Sebastian Kuhn. I'm
Hello,
a
Sebastian.
professor at Sherwood-Randall University nearby, and I'm one of the 1,000 users that come to this lab to do exciting experiments. And I just wanted to add to that aspect that you mentioned, nuclear security, which actually this lab ostensibly is not engaged so much in that direction. But it turns out that bringing graduate students to this lab to experience what they can experience with the science, the excitement, makes a very good foundation for them to find then later on employment in such areas. So, for instance, 3 of my former students are now working in that area, either at Los Alamos National Lab or at private companies developing new screening methods for security purposes. So it should not be overlooked.
That's fantastic. Well, look, our own secretary is a nuclear physicist.
Yeah.
And he's obviously, as I said, he's leading the charge on our efforts to prevent proliferation. He's also responsible for ensuring that at his leadership level as a cabinet member for ensuring that we maintain that safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent that has to be then delivered to the Pentagon to put on the delivery systems. So again, fundamental science leading to a policymaker role that's hugely significant. Thank you for contributing that, Sebastian.
Andrew.
Andrew Hutton, Accelerated Division. The START 2 negotiations ended up with both America and Russia agreeing to dismantle nuclear weapons, which both of them did.
Mm-hmm.
It also included a clause saying that both of them would get rid of their plutonium, which as far as I know hasn't worked.
Mm-hmm.
When are you going, are there plans to unleash your scientists onto fix? We would love to be part of that.
So this is a hugely important agreement.
I usually try and stop that kind of question.
So scientists are quite unruly, I've discovered. So this plutonium disposition agreement is an enormously important agreement because we and the Russians have a large amount of weapons-grade plutonium, and we agreed to dispose of it in that agreement. And we're facing enormous technical and budgetary challenges in our program, and the Russians are as well. So what the Secretary and I are trying to figure out is how do we dispose of this in a way that respects the taxpayer dollar. If we had unlimited money, we would go ahead and do what we have begun to do at Savannah River, which is to build this MOX facility, but we are facing really pretty daunting challenges there. And he's asked, and Congress has asked for us to look again at whether there are alternative disposition mechanisms. The agreement does include a clause that allows us to go back and talk to the Russians if we can't achieve the goal in the way we initially set out to achieve it. And I suspect that's going to have to happen. And the challenge we face is we don't want to let the Russians off the hook because it's very important to us that they get rid of their plutonium as well. They have some parts of their territory, their vast 11 time zone territory that is vulnerable. And this material is the kind of material that we want to keep out of the wrong hands. So it's an ongoing project for us, and we do put our best scientific minds to it. And if we can find a way, we would, I'm sure, welcome that.
Okay, more questions on the right now.
Hi, my name is Yishu. I'm a summer intern here. I'm a student from St. Olaf College, and this question
From
is...
which college?
St. Olaf College in Minnesota. So I have a question for you in particular. You mentioned you are a scientist as well. How did you come to pursue policy making?
So I'm a soft scientist by your standards, because my PhD is in international relations. How did I come to policy making? I have always wanted to make a difference in the world since I was pretty little. And when I went to college, I was privileged to have inspirational teachers, professors who made me want to do more work in the field of international relations. I was just so excited by the study of international relations, and I went on to graduate school. But I didn't want to be a scholar. I wanted to be a practitioner. I really knew that already, that I wanted to be out in the world doing stuff. I didn't think I was smart enough, to be honest, to be a great scholar. I had these amazing professors, and I thought those are the people who should be in the Ivy Tower writing the books. I want to go out and try to change the world. And so in graduate school, I had a pretty rough time with my thesis advisor, who wanted me to be a scholar. He was disgusted with me that I wanted to be a practitioner. And I just had to stay the course and explain to him that that was the path I'd set myself on. And I was thankful that I had the fundamental education I did, not a fundamental science, but a strong education, because it was a time when there were very few women in national security. I'm 55, so when I was in graduate school and coming out in the mid-80s, late 80s, there were almost no women in this field, and that degree was an important one as a sort of blue chip credential, so that I could get in there and do the hard work that I was interested in doing. And I'm thankful I chose the path I did. It's also been meaningful to have the PhD, because I have then, when I haven't been in government, had the opportunity to be in universities or think tanks at a senior level and to teach and do research that has then enabled me to be ready with new ideas to come back into government when the opportunity presented itself, as it did in this administration.
We still have time for more questions.
Victor Makeyev, staff scientist at Physics Division of JLab. My question
Where are
is...
you from originally, I have to ask?
Sorry, originally I am from Russia, from Moscow State University.
When did you come to the United States?
In 2002.
What did you work on at Moscow State?
In Moscow State University I was working in, let's say, classical nuclear physics, structure of atomic nuclei, and now I continue my work at small distance scale, more fundamental in my view physics, hadronic physics. And my question to you is about what is United States government vision about the priority of fundamental hadron physics in condition when budgetary situation objectively becomes more difficult? And what instrument you are planning to use in order to provide sustainable development of hadron physics, which is, in my opinion, have fundamental importance for entire progress of American society and worldwide society, because the subject of our research addresses the processes with maximum energy release in the universe and address most fundamental building block of hadron matter, quark and gluon, and nature of hadron mass in the universe. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a pretty big question. I would say the best answer I can give you is that we invest in the best science to deliver results that we can then demonstrate, as we were discussing, advances our position competitively in the world. So there's no question that there is competition for research dollars. And we have, for example, in the high energy physics arena, had the P5 report, which has been so important to setting a course that is agreed upon by the physicists around the country. That's a good example of bringing people together around a strategy. And we will continue to emphasize excellence in the work of our lab so that we can then point to that as we make the case on the Hill for continued funding. We face big challenges and we have to make hard decisions about what to invest in. I have been responsible for the whole issue of what we're doing at Cadarache in France, for example. The secretary has been recused from that. And this is a big, this is hard, and it's ambitious, and it's the holy grail in a sense, but we have to judge as a policymaker, and I have to go up and testify on the Hill about this, what is the best use of taxpayer dollars in the competitive landscape we face. So what I would say to you is keep doing phenomenal work, and we will base our strategy on that work.
Walter.
I have an easier question. It's Volker. I'm also in the physics division here. Originally I come from Germany. I'm
Where do
very
you
proud
come from in Germany?
that Germany has given up developing atomic bombs, nuclear bombs. And my question is related to a big speech that President Obama gave about disarmament or getting rid of
In Prague.
nuclear and I think the best way, of course, is to somehow take the lead in some way. And so my question is, President Obama, he got the Nobel Prize in part based on this kind of vision that he had and that he talked about. So my question is, what concrete steps can be taken, or is the administration taking, to get to a lower level of a nuclear armament? We have now new countries that, like Pakistan, has acquired nuclear weapons very recently, and I have not seen anyone giving voluntarily up their nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so thank you. I realized that I left out an important dimension of our work to prevent countries or persuade countries not to build their own nuclear weapons, and that involves civil nuclear cooperation. So let me just add that, because that's very important. We do a lot of that work around the world to help countries build a civil nuclear program that is based on American technology. That's our preference because that has the highest safety standards. It also is beneficial to our economy. And that's a way of, and when we do that with another country, we negotiate an agreement called the 123 agreement, which is about their foregoing enrichment and reprocessing in exchange for the cooperation with us. So to your question, well, we've done a lot already. There was a New START agreement negotiated and signed, and it's being implemented with Russia to reduce our nuclear arsenals on both sides. It's one of the few areas of cooperation with Russia that is still operative. And the Russians and we both see it as being in our national interest to continue reducing to the numbers agreed in the New START treaty, which was signed in 2010 in Prague. But also the president, so I mentioned that he gave that famous speech in Prague in 2009. In Berlin in 2013, I noted he gave another speech, and in that speech he challenged Russia to go to lower numbers, to come down by a third below the New START levels, as well as to work with our allies to come up with a proposal to reduce our tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, because the Russians have a very significant number of tactical nuclear weapons deployed in Europe, and we do not. So there's a big imbalance, and the question is whether we could motivate Russia to come down on its tactical nuclear weapons in Europe. They have not been responsive to either of those proposals, unfortunately. We continue to hold out the possibility that they might change their mind. But there's a certain point at which our judgment is it's not in the American national interest to go to lower numbers if our major peer competitor in the nuclear sphere, and that continues to be Russia, doesn't choose to go in the same direction. We do work with other countries. You mentioned Pakistan. Pakistan chose to go nuclear, as did India. That was a big failing in the non-proliferation regime, obviously, and we've had to make the hard decision that ultimately it's better to work with Pakistan on ensuring the security of its arsenal. It's not going to denuclearize anytime soon, although that's something that we do remain concerned about. And I think that that's probably, if you ask me when I was doing that job, the last job I had at the White House, the countering WMD job, the thing that kept me up at night was worrying about the Pakistanis and the Indians and the rivalry between the two of them, the hair-trigger nature of their nuclear postures, the neighborhood in which they live, the vulnerabilities that they face, and how destabilizing that could be regionally and to the world. So I would say we're doing everything we can in a tough environment, and that the president continues to hold out the prospect of reductions if others want to join us.
Okay, we talked earlier in the afternoon about the potential for our students, some students, to skew the apparent age of the lab. They fixed that by all sitting together on the right. And so this is the third question from the area.
student from Arizona State, and I'm working with the Detector Group. And so I'm like really into the whole outreach, science communication thing, and I'm wondering, what do you think is the best way that we as young people can bring science to the masses?
Use new media, use social media. That's obviously a very powerful tool, and it has the capacity to reach so many. And it's one of the things we have to do better at, because those of us who skew the age demographic in the other direction are just effective in that domain. So we're working hard on that on the digital team at DOE headquarters, but I would ask you to help us think about that. And Brianna, we actually have a Women in Energy series. I don't know if you've seen that on our website, the DOE.gov website. You ought to look at it. We ought to get you involved in it. But I think that that's a very important dimension of this, is figuring out ways to use all the power of new media to get the word out about how exciting the work is and how young people ought to follow your lead in working in this field. And to reach out to minorities, underserved populations. The gender balance is still an issue in STEM. We see that, so you can be a champion of that, and your friends can as well.
In other words, why do you think we're hosting you here? Okay, more questions.
My name is John Hogan. I'm a staff engineer working on the CBAF energy upgrade, and I'll skew the age a little bit the other way. So hopefully this question may be a little bit easier. With regard to, can you speak a little bit about development of domestic energy resources from an economic standpoint, and how that may affect the energy independence?
So this is an awesome story for the United States, which many people don't appreciate, which is that we have, in the last 6 years, so just in the course of this administration, changed our position in the world because of the development of domestic energy resources. We're now the largest oil and gas producer in the world. Most people don't appreciate that. We have tremendous resources in this country. We're also bringing online renewables at a pace that nobody could have anticipated. I mentioned solar, there's also wind. We also are building the first new nuclear plants in this country in 30 years with DOE funding. And so what we're doing is trying to ensure that we do have that kind of energy security that we have not had previously. We don't have to be dependent on others. And we can also assist our friends and allies around the world in becoming less dependent on sources of supply that create pressure points for them. And so I think for the American people, what this means is jobs and growth. That's very exciting. I noted the opportunities in this sector for jobs for young people. We're doing a lot of training that's quite interesting through DOE support, working at community colleges around the country to be a convener and a catalyst, to partner industry, which needs a skilled workforce, with young people and those who are transitioning from jobs that have ceased to be as interesting or economically meaningful, and also for veterans who are coming out of service and who need new opportunities. We're partnering with them to provide the skills training through our community college network around the country with those who are seeking those skilled new employees. And around the country, we're seeing the benefits of that. So I would say this dynamic sector of our economy is a tremendous asset to the American people, and people are just beginning to really appreciate it in some areas of the country more than others, because the jobs have come online in ways that have really transformed the landscape. And I will close by noting that much of this comes from research done at DOE. So whether it's the work that was done on shale gas in the 70s and 80s at our labs, or the work done on solar power at a place like NREL in Colorado, work done on wind turbines, we have been powering our economy through that work that has been developed and then deployed to the American consumer. We're almost out of time, I think. I unfortunately have to go back to Washington today. I'd like to stay here in Virginia.
Hi, Daniel Akers, student at ODU, intern here, work in magnetic testing. I had a more domestic question. The national labs do a lot of advancement in the sciences and make a lot of inventions, innovations, all that. But so do private research groups, and we haven't seen as many of those in the last 30 or 40 years since they lost their tax exempt status, and the government has recently shown a lot of interest in the sciences being advanced with all the big STEM program stuff they're putting forth. So have they considered giving the private research groups tax exempt status again?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that we are doing lots of work with the private sector at our labs. So this is, there are agreements that can be reached between a lab and a private entity to do collaborative work, CRADAs, and it enables that kind of partnership that would benefit both the lab and the private entity. And there are various rules governing how that has to be done, but they're very fruitful, and across the lab network they're in place. And there are people here, where is the person? Raise your hand, who are responsible for these endeavors and who you might want to talk with. Can you stand up and just wait so people know who you are?
Drew is, of course, one of the team and several people who help in that area. Not seeing for,
One last question.
Heidi. One more question. Do we need a calculator?
No. You never know. Hi, I'm Heidi Derby. I'm in the CFO office here. So my question kind of relates to John's about domestic energy and stuff. And I guess my latest question is, there's been so much back and forth on E15, ethanol gas 15, which sort of affects, you know, everybody from agriculture to environmental to science to industry. And so what is the latest on the Department of Energy's stand on that?
I don't know exactly what your question is on it. What's our stand on it?
As far as automotive industry, that engines can't deal with that, but from the agriculture, it was the big thing to push all the corn, ethanol, gas, but now it's coming to find out that environmentally it's you know,
So
taking its
basically
toll and everything.
Okay, now I understand your question. Basically what we do is the science. So we try to answer questions about what is viable that policymakers can then make a decision about. And as you know, this particular issue pits some states against other states, and this is something that many in Congress have very strong views about. I was recently out in Iowa, visiting our lab there. So what we're trying to do is provide the evidence-based science upon which policymakers can make a decision about what portion of gasoline might include ethanol and what the environmental consequences are of that, so that policymakers can make an informed decision.
Okay, let's thank the Deputy Secretary.
That you go by Mont. I would request that you address me as Liz, please. I would be much more
We had a
comfortable with that.
discussion yesterday about exactly that, because one of us had Liz on their cheat sheet and it was expunged.
In government, they take away a lot of things from you, but you can't take away my name. So I'd be appreciative if you would do that. Thank you.